Welcome to Bishop Fox Live from DEF CON. I'm Joe Seckman, AVP of R&D.
And I am Tom Eston, AVP of Consulting, also at Bishop Fox. And I am very pleased to introduce our next guest, who is the CEO of Bishop Fox, Vinnie Liu. Welcome to the live stream, Vinnie.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate you fitting me in, although I've squeezed me into your busy schedule. You guys have much more important people to talk to, but I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys.
Well, we're glad to have you, and I know it's been a busy week, right, here at all the cons, Security Summer Camp, as we like to call it. So, what's your thoughts on the week so far?
Thoughts on the week so far? Yeah. It's been interesting, right? Because I've mostly been up, and around Black Hat. Been having a lot of meetings. Obviously, a lot of my conversations so far have really been around, at Black Hat's a little bit more businessy, right, than DEF CON. DEF CON's got a lot of the cooler content, I think, in my opinion, and a lot of it has been around like the market conditions of, what is everything, what's going on in the economy, both in the U.S. as well as globally. Really trying to understand that. What's the impact for cybersecurity going to be, as well as, I think a lot of investors wind up going to Black Hat trying to figure out like what's the next trend and what's the next thing. And a lot of CISOs are there trying to figure out what's new that I need to be aware of. So a lot of the conversations around that and some combination of those two or three things. So it's been very interesting. I've been hearing different stuff and just trying to get a pulse on what's going on.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've been hearing from a lot of people that this has been kind of like a reunion of sorts, because a lot of people just haven't attended any conferences for so long. And I know for me personally, it's been great just networking and getting back to seeing people I haven't seen in so long, and then having those conversations like you said.
Yeah.
It's been really impactful, I think, this week.
Yeah, I was out till like 3 a.m. last night, just catching up with people, right? You got like a full day of meetings and planned events, dinners and things like that. And then afterwards you go out and you have a chance to actually see all your friends and people that you haven't seen in years in some cases, depending on when the last time they were at Black Hat. I mean, I feel like it is very much like a reunion. And it's been, energizing that I can actually still stay up till 3 because I'm excited to see my friends. Like I'm definitely getting older.
Getting old.
Yeah, we're getting older. But yeah, no, it's cool, man. I love that, we can both be excited about all the new stuff that is happening in our field. And I think that's always been one of the best things about cybersecurity is just how cutting edge and cool it still remains. But even, having a chance to be nostalgic and saying like, remember the Alexis Park and how terrible that was, but it was the best thing at that age, right? Back then, 20 years ago. And it was like, this is amazing. So
I was telling someone the other day, like, I actually missed the Riviera. And like, no one would say that back then.
Oh, yeah.
Like, no way.
Yeah.
But Riviera was kind of dumpy and all that, but I actually missed that. Like, a smaller DEF CON, right?
Is that hotel still around?
No, the Riviera was torn down.
It was, okay.
Yeah.
I was
years ago. I know it doesn't even exist now.
Yeah.
I guess that's one of the things I miss of like, I feel like these conferences have gotten so big, like DEF CON is like 30,000 people and like
is Black Hat, the attendance?
I think it's something like that. It's huge. Wow. And to think of like, I guess in my mind it makes me feel like, does that change like the content, right? And maybe it doesn't necessarily, because now there's just so many people attending. But it's fun to reminisce sometimes of when early on when we were going to those cons.
I've always felt like there's a lot of great content here. What I would say, given sort of the speed of the news cycle and sort of the speed and change in the way people communicate, like I'm just as likely to see really amazing research or work come out of the community throughout the year as I am to see it at DEF CON, where I feel like back in the day, it would be the case where like Black Hat would be where you drop 0 days. Like if you had a 0 day, you would just present it, mic drop, peace out. That's how you got a Black Hat talk, like here's some problems, good luck with that. But I mean, obviously that's not the case anymore. And I think obviously as it's matured over time, like DEF CON continues to be sort of more where the technical leaning tends to be. And you see a lot more like geopolitical stuff at Black Hat, right? And that's interesting as well. But I don't know. Do you guys? I mean, for me, I come for the community, right? Just to see people and to reconnect with people and to meet new people. And I'm curious if you guys feel like that's shifted for you. Do you feel like that's the case for most people? I mean, I know we're spitting in the wind here. I don't know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially, as I've grown in my career and I've had different experiences and different jobs and different roles, it's been less about I'm going to learn something at a talk versus I want to go and now build relationships with people, either people that I know or people that I just haven't met yet. And just through introducing or getting introduced to people, I find that a lot more valuable for me, just kind of where I'm at in my career. But early on, it was all about the talks. Like I wanted to get into as many talks as possible and just soak in all that information.
I was just going to say, literally right before you came to join us here, I was just having that conversation. Like, wow, it's been so long since I've spoken to people and folks, and just that opportunity to reconnect and look back and be like, I can't let that relationship die on the vine like that any longer. Got to keep in touch much better than I have. So
I mean, our industry moves so fast. You always have like 200% of your possible capacity to do, if not more. So it's really easy to get sucked into that and not even pause and say, wait a second, like take a breather here and see what's going on.
Yeah, several conversations that we've had today, it's centered around mentorship and security education and giving back and paying it forward. So one of the questions that we've got actually through the audience was, what do you consider a true entry-level position in security? Because we've talked about like experienced people dropping O-days at Black Hat, and there's folks out there that are just trying to get their feet wet and may feel intimidated in that area. So I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
What's a real entry-level position? I mean, I think the one that most people look at is like a SOC analyst, right? That's like kind of your standard, like, hey, let me get in, let me start to learn a little bit about network traffic, understand different activities, look at logs, things like that. It's a little bit more like in a structured environment, at least sort of the entry level stuff. You can move your way up, you can start to grow from there. It kind of teaches you the fundamentals. So I get that. I think one of the new things that's been pretty interesting is the use of bug bounty programs, right? Bug bounty programs are obviously a great way to hone your skills and continue to, have an opportunity to go after targets and experiment against them, right? With a bit of a reward at the end there too. So I think that's been interesting from the offensive perspective. But I would say that there's, I think, more and more opportunities in other areas, not just in the SOC and response space, because I do feel like, because in cyber, oftentimes like we all come from like very technical backgrounds, but I actually believe that in the long run and for organizations, it's just as important to have the right programs and processes and policies and controls in place. So I do actually think there's an opportunity for people to get in and really support it from that perspective. I think threat intel is another area where if you've got language capabilities, you can begin to get into and understand more about the culture. Because again, like people oftentimes think about cybersecurity as being like a super technical field, and while it is, I think in many ways cybersecurity is exceptionally challenging from a technical perspective, because not only do you have to know how a system works, you have to know it so well, you have to know how it's not supposed to work. You've got to know technologies across the board. You can't just be like an operating system, a database, or like a application specialist. You really need to have a very, very broad understanding of all of that. And so, but I think as the industry expands, you're going to see a lot more opportunity to get in at, like what are some program policy aspects that I can take care of? What are some threat intelligence things that I can do, leveraging multiple disciplines that you might have in your background, which I actually hope allows people to kind of laterally move into the industry and not always feel like they have to come in from the ground up, because it, in a lot of ways, is going to be a way, way bigger problem before, things start to get under control.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how you see a lot of chatter on LinkedIn and on Twitter about these job postings that say, okay, you need 3 to 5 years of experience for an entry-level position. Like literally they say that. And it's like, I think that just discourages a lot of new people or people that want to, get into cybersecurity because they see recruiters advertising jobs a certain way, and it probably is just a disservice, right? And maybe we need to think about how do we change the way we recruit and advertise for these more junior level types of positions.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think that's ignorance in a lot of ways. You know, I have this whole theory around this, which is, you know, people just expect to be able to put out a job posting these days and like, and then people will show up and they will magically apply for my job because it's cybersecurity and it's cool. And I was like, no, it's not. It's not that way anymore, right? And there's so many different ways that we have to attack this problem. First of all, I think fundamentally, if you do that, you're really doing it wrong, right? You have to understand the market that you're applying into. And like humanity started out as like foragers. Like if you went to a place and there was like, you know, like, oh, there's berries on the bush or there's like an apple in the tree, like congratulations, you're the first one there. You can get that talent. But every bush and every tree has been picked over at this point. You know, like there's no secret island full of cybersecurity experts waiting to be hired. So like to go out there, it's I think in a little bit maybe just inexperience that leads people and, you know, recruiting departments in these big companies or whatnot, just to expect somebody to show up and apply. I think so much of what we have to do and the responsibility is to begin farming, right? To grow and develop our own talent. That's what allowed humanity to grow and thrive and expand and actually have a sustainable you know, food supply. And really that's what we've got to do in cybersecurity as well. I mean, it's one of the things that we're doing, and it's to like, you know, self-promote here, but like our Bishop Fox Academy investment is massive. It's massive. It's investment in internal, third party, right, training. It's not just training from the ground up, but it's also leveling up all the people. And I think the more companies have that, the better. It's the university relationships that we have both in Mexico and are expanding, right, that we absolutely need to be fostering the community. And we might train 100 people through the university programs in Mexico. Yep. And maybe a small fraction of those might join us, but it's worth it because in the long run, the community gets the benefit of that, right? And I wish more companies would do that, even if they didn't get every single piece of talent that came out of those universities. Like it needs to happen, and I wish more large companies would be willing to make that investment, right? But and this gets me onto a different tangent, but like that's fundamentally one of the biggest issues that I think like we're going to do it, and I hope others take notice and follow lead. You know.
Yeah, I think too really important aspect of what you were just talking about is developing from within as well, recognizing the talent that you've got already at your disposal that you don't necessarily need to go out and recruit and do a job function in that aspect for. Maybe the folks that are well suited for a particular role are right in front of you, and finding them and seeing if they're interested, there's a mutual interest, and then develop.
Yeah, and college isn't the only way that you can do it either. Like I was literally having breakfast with a security leader at one of the large global banks yesterday, and we were talking about talent. Everybody's talking about talent, and he gave me the example of like, look, one of the best analysts that I have for was a biomechanical engineer, and like exceptionally talented. Also happened to write Python code as part of mechanical engineering. And it's like, look, you're a little bit unusual, but why don't you just, here's a piece of malware. Do you understand it? He's like, yeah, within like 2 hours. He's like, yeah, I know exactly what's doing. Here's what it's doing. And it's like, oh, that lateral thinking and skill set and a little bit of technical skill meant that person could hit the ground running like within months as opposed to years, like at a very high operating level. And I think we've got to look for that as well, is look for those opportunities where like extremely intelligent, talented people just need a little bit of a boost. And that's, again, Joe, to your point, it's like, you don't have to start at the bottom. You can come in, you can make a lateral move, and you can actually have an exceptionally successful career in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And opportunity to learn and grow.
It's amazing to me. I've seen people that have come from completely different career paths and end up in cybersecurity or in pen testing. I mean, I know we have several people at Bishop Fox, like I think of like Kelly Albrink, who was a fine arts dealer. Yeah. Right.
Like an Asian arts.
Yeah.
She knows jade really well.
Right.
Like I can tell if it's fake or not,
Yeah. I mean, and, there was a gentleman I worked with in my last role who was an ER nurse and became a pen tester. And what's interesting to me is they all bring different experiences to the table. For him, it was more about compassion and empathy that he could show towards clients because he had that medical nursing background, which I found fascinating.
One of my favorite CISOs was a nurse.
Yeah.
Started his career as a nurse and wound up as a CISO over a multi-billion-dollar,
Yeah.
like that's
crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that human empathy aspect is supremely underrated, I think, as a skill in our field, and definitely is rising as a theme in some of the conversations that Tom and I have had today, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I think as we become more enlightened about, what leadership is and how to be effective, and how do we operate effectively as an organization, that those qualities, that ability to think differently becomes critical.
Yeah. So one of the things, and I know we've probably heard this throughout the week, of what's next for pen testing. I think that's like a big topic, and I'm sure there's been talks at both Black Hat, DEF CON, and B-Sides on that, and kind of the word continuous comes to mind. What are your thoughts on kind of the next evolution of pen testing?
Yeah. So I think of pen testing, and that's a pretty loaded term, but I think of like anything that's like all about finding vulnerabilities, whatever layer of the stack it's in, whether it's internal, whether it's external, whether it's product, if it's HTTP based or network based in some other way. I think when it comes to testing itself, and I think of just like security testing, I fundamentally think there's a few shifts, both at the market level, at the governmental and regulatory level, and at the technical level. So like, I think what you're asking about sort of the shift from a technical delivery aspect of things. And like, when I think about that, it's like, I think the premise is this: it's not so much 0 days that are just like everybody's stockpiling. Like, don't get me wrong, there are 0 days and they are being stockpiled, but they're being used sparingly. But the vast majority, like there's a ton of breaches that are actually happening with a lot of impact, where it's not a 0 day, it's an end day. And where a lot of the issue comes in today is it's a game of speed. It is become a game of speed, where attacker sophistication and technology and equipment has gotten to the point where they're much faster than the defenders in terms of identifying opportunistic exploit paths. And so I think one of the things that Continuous provides us is security testing from the very beginning is always is like 2 weeks, 4 weeks, point in time, 1 to 4 times a year, really needs to be shifting along with everything else. It's not like you check your network for any, intrusion, twice a year for 4 weeks, right? No, there's a SOC, you're monitoring constantly. Like, why would you not do the same thing on the proactive side? Because the SOC stuff is very reactive. It's like, how quickly can I detect? How quickly can I respond? How quickly can I, restore? And I think with proactive testing, you have to do the same thing. You can't have that old model, because attackers are basically saying, we're going to come after you constantly. So why are you only blocking twice a year? I'm throwing punches all year long. So that's the big difference, is that we've got to be practicing on how to be blocking constantly, getting ahead of the attackers from a speed perspective. So philosophically, I think that, and without going down a huge rabbit hole, that's what I think is the big driver behind it. Are you guys, what are you hearing in the space as well around it? Like, do you feel like there's been a shift towards that? What are the obstacles to achieving it?
I think it's becoming more of an expectation that it is more frequent, it is more continuous, there is more advanced knowledge and foreknowledge of what issues are there. Also, just knowledge of what I own, what assets I have, and part of that comprise my entire attack surface. Like, what is it?
Yeah.
One interesting question I'll let you answer too, Tom. I got another question queued up.
No, I think it's I agree with you completely. For me, it's also, point in time won't necessarily ever go away. There's always going to be a need for,
Absolutely.
The compliance-based, I need a traditional report because my auditor does and things like that. But I think
there's certain targets that hey, this product is going to get deployed in a power substation. No one's ever going to look at it. I need to harden it before it goes out. I don't want you testing it continuously, because you shouldn't be. Right. But it needs to be deployed before, checked before it goes out. So there's always these cases where it's not the end all be all.
Yeah, it's almost like an earmark of my current state of where I stand and in the progress of my security journey versus I'm okay until next quarter or next year or whenever. So the question that I had queued up though is just thinking about, we've had a couple discussions too about compliance and security and where they all interact, but also the aspect of compliance as it pertains to continuous security is also one of the things maybe it is being discussed and I just don't really see it much, but I'm curious about the impact of continuous testing on compliance.
Yeah. Well, I think this speaks to kind of like both market as well as regulatory change and sort of what we're seeing in the market. I would say from a compliance perspective, I think the thing that I think too is like PCI, ASV requirements went from once a year to twice a year. Like, do I think they're going to go back to once a year? No. What I think, are they going to go to 4 times a year? Or are they just going to skip ahead and be like, you need to be continuously testing and identifying where your vulnerabilities are. You already start to see kind of glimmers of that in the government's CMMC requirements, where they're talking about having a program to continuously monitor your assets and continuously be looking for vulnerabilities around it, right? So you're starting to see that in the newer regulation that's coming out, and you're starting to see it in the updates of that. On the flip side, I would say that what we've seen in the financial services industry and the financial industry, as well as some of the technical, the bigger, more sophisticated technology companies, is we're actually starting to see them lean in a lot more. And I suspect healthcare, being a regulated industry, is going to come next. But we're starting to see them lean in very, very deeply into these, like, how do we continuously identify our assets, and then how do we continuously test them? Because I think for a large part, the attack surface market, and I'll say that in the what was originally defined as attack surface, because I think attack surface is now a term that's been abused so much from a marketing standpoint, because it sounds cool, that it becomes almost so generic, like zero trust, that you don't like zero trust.
What does
what?
that mean?
Yeah,
anymore?
exactly.
Yeah.
So like, but like in terms of identifying assets and identifying, those types of things, like the challenge with that industry has always been like, it's not operationalized data and it's very thin and it hasn't been enriched. And I feel like that the direction that we really need to be going in is having like very enriched data, having much better information at hand that we can operationalize or is already operationalized for you to feed into being able to do something with it. Right? Because like, again, we've got a cybersecurity talent shortage. So why would you go out there and buy like yet another data feed that then you've got to hire yet another person to then operationalize to give to somebody? Maybe if you pull that off successfully and everything goes well, that you can use it. So I feel like there's going to be a confluence of the two, both continuous asset discovery and continuous testing. And I think, that's what we're betting on. Yeah. So, the other part, I think from a market perspective, is one of the things that we've seen shift in the last 3 to 4 years is fundamentally nobody is willing to trust one another anymore, but in a good way, right? Is that after SolarWinds, we said, okay, so maybe we won't let people just self-certify and say like, we're secure, believe us, take my word for it. I've done a security, right? Security check. So from a compliance perspective, it's all well and good to like check the box on certain types of things, but you're starting to see this proliferation of companies that are basically helping you check the box faster, right? Because it's so painful. So you see it a lot of these like startups like Drata and Vanta and others that are basically like, okay, it's super painful, but let's make it less painful and get you through the process. Do I think it's like meaningfully moving the security bar or, the ball forward? Like maybe a bit, the bar up a little bit, but I think we all understand that like, the SOC 2 ISO 27001 is like a standard that you kind of just need to have from a process and controls perspective. But what we're seeing now is also, it's like, okay, you had all that stuff, you still got breached, you still had stuff injected into your software. So we actually want to have supply chain security. We actually want to have testing done, and third-party testing, independent validation went from being the gold standard to being table stakes. We're not going to work with you. As any enterprise organization is like, we're not going to work with you until you have your testing done by a third party. And the strictest ones are saying this short list of 5 companies are the companies that are actually qualified to do that testing, right? And you've got to work with one of them or get an exception, and we're going to interview and grill them to make sure that you did it the right way. Because again, this isn't a check the box thing. You can't just hire anyone off the street. You have to do a good job around it. And I think that change and shift is driving a lot more of the proactive work that needs and should be done.
So I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier, talking about medical industry and the power, industry as well, energy. There isn't really a one-size-fits-all approach with continuous security or just security in general. For example, you have a medical device that has a vulnerability that is connected to somebody that's keeping them alive, and interrogating that device to find vulnerabilities may adversely affect the performance of that specific device, or the remediation, the recommended remediation may require you taking that offline, which also takes the person connected to it offline. So what are the, it just seems like there's so
That's
many.
a very euphemistic way of describing it.
There's so many little details and challenges that go into the play. Like, what's the real path forward? Is it just baby steps going down that path to continuous?
You know, I do think medical device manufacturers have kind of had a wake up call. I mean, I think you guys might remember, like, it's almost 5 years ago. I would say it is actually 5 years ago to the day that the sort of St. Jude Medical Abbott Laboratories MedSec pacemaker issue was the big news, where MedSec and Muddy Waters had basically made the claim that, look, these pacemakers are insecure, and St. Jude and Abbott were having, well, they were in the process of a merger, but St. Jude was basically not having any of it, and saying, you know, that's false, this is not true, this is, you know, we're gonna, and they basically tried to like sue them into oblivion. And we were brought in, like Bishop Fox assembled not only Bishop Fox experts, but also a panel of, you know, industry experts, independent experts. Matthew Green from Johns Hopkins, Joe Grand from the hardware side, Drew Porter from an RF perspective, right, as well as Carl and others from our team. And we took a look at it, we did the analysis, and we said it did a very detailed, very public report on it, like actually broke down every single one. It was like, these are true. This is true. And what and what you can see, I think you can actually see these in public court filings, is like, the fact is, like, they had to amend the complaint from, this is libel, this is defamation, none of this is true, into you unfairly targeted us. And that eventually got settled. And I would tell you that I think today is the, I want to say it's like the 5-year anniversary of the NDA, which, you know, and so I don't know if anyone on that is going to talk about that anymore, but, you know, I'm certainly only going to speak about what's public and what is out there, but it was an interesting situation. I would say, though, that in the meantime, it has been a wake-up call for medical device manufacturers, and I'm glad. It's like a good thing. And I do think it's great that they're leaning into it, and they're wanting to build programs and having security be part of the quality programs. And so I think we're making inroads there, because it is one of those things, Joe, as you mentioned, like, if it's in, like, more dangerous than like the device that's connected to a substation monitoring power output. It's like, it is there to restart your heart.
Life and death.
Your heart stops, and like, that's real life and death stuff. You don't want to mess with just random code updates. There's no CI/CD for your pacemaker. So, I certainly hope there isn't. Yeah, like, I mean, not yet. We'll see. But I'd baby step that one for sure.
I was going to ask real quick, just maybe going back to, like, we're talking about careers and, you know, junior people, things like that. What's some really good career advice you can offer? Maybe just, you know, people that not necessarily just getting into cybersecurity, but, you know, thinking about maybe, you know, your experiences and how you kind of grew up in the industry. Like, what kind of advice would you give those individuals?
Yeah. You know, I don't want to give generic advice, but I'll kind of give you advice from where I was at, and, you know, like, and hopefully others can learn from my mistakes. But I would say that one of the things that I was always just like terrified of, was asking questions, Like, I was curious. I wanted to know, but I feel like, you know, and maybe this is a product of me growing up, you know, and getting my start on IRC, when you would just get abused. You would just absolutely get just totally abused by random internet strangers. And, you know, it's like, I'm like 13 years old and I'm getting trashed by people on the internet by asking questions. And I think that, you know, but what I would say is like, yeah, no, like, you keep asking those questions. Like let that shit roll off. That the smartest, and I don't count myself among this group even remotely, but the most talented and smartest people were the ones who were like, okay, yeah, like, talk shit to me, but I'm still curious. Like, how am I going to find the answer? I'm going to ask people, like, learn from other people. Fortunately, now there's like a treasure trove of information around security that's just floating around on the internet that you can get, and books, classes, actual courses in schools. Yeah. But I think the most important thing is to just ask questions, like, learn from others. And there are a lot of people who will help. There are a lot of, like, programs like Bishop Fox Academy and others that I think are going to be, I hope, spinning up to foster more in the community and give back. And yeah, ask questions. Just do that. That's probably the biggest thing that, like, if I look back and regret, I'm like, oh, man, I should have just raised my hand more, like been a little bit bolder about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good advice. Yeah, it's kind of just like stay curious, right?
Yeah.
That's the big thing. And I think a lot of us, that we're just like, like how I grew up, I just wanted to like break things and I wanted to like see how things work. And that was just all that curiosity. And I think you're right. It's all that is found out through asking questions
Yeah.
to people.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like, it's tough because you're putting yourself out there. You're making yourself vulnerable about it. And it's like, it's like you can start to develop a complex if you get like kicked when you're on the ground too many times, but try. Just keep asking. You'll find the people who will help. And those are the people that you want to spend time with.
Awesome. So, tell us a little bit about like how people can, follow you and, get in touch with you if they want to ask questions.
Interestingly, so I don't do Twitter that much. I just never got onto it. I'm like,
I'm right there with
I see Britt. She's like, yeah, you don't. Like shaking her head at me. It's like, get on it, Vinny. No, I don't do Twitter that much. I'm not really on Facebook. But I have LinkedIn a lot. And interestingly, like, I would like, I won't respond to you if you're trying to pitch me something, which, unfortunately with LinkedIn happens all the time.
Yeah.
But I get requests for people who want to ask for advice all the time on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I will always accept and I will always respond. I think I'm really proud of that. Like, LinkedIn is a really great way to get a hold of me. Or, just shoot me a message on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way to do that. And yeah, for sure. I'm always happy to chat.
That's great. Well, thanks so much for coming on the live stream. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And,
Hope I didn't bore anybody too bad.
No, it was great. So awesome. And so we will be back with more great guests for our live stream. So stay tuned.